Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Okay, I'll be straight with you. Haunted houses just freak me the you-know-what out. And you know what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do because, quite frankly, you're listening right now. Please subscribe. It means a lot. It really does. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. Give us the old 5-star rating. Pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. We're at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, pretty much everywhere. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, do not hesitate to check us out on the social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, and we're on the Instagram at, well, where else? We're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, you know, if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, guess what? We love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, it is appropriately themed. It is a fun one because we are in the Halloween season. We're in the Halloween spirit where things get a little scary, a little creepy. And we're talking about a show which is airing tonight. It's a 2-part original documentary on TNE for their Halloween programming. It's called Haunted Gold Rush. And like I said, it's a 2-part original documentary that follows 3 women from British Columbia who have their own paranormal investigation company. And they've traveled the world helping lost souls communicate from beyond the grave. And what they do is explore the ghostly mysteries along British Columbia's historic Gold Rush Trail, told through the eyes of a strong female force of paranormal investigators, Corine Carey, Leanne Sallenback, and Kelly Ireland. British Columbia's Gold Rush Trail was a bustling, wild, and often violent place in the 1800s, but today the 350-kilometer stretch of land is considered a hotspot for paranormal activity and has hundreds of stories of hauntings from more than a dozen locations. Ghost sightings along the trail are nothing new, but there have recently been more numerous, intense and dramatic reports. But now these 3 best friends and paranormal detectives have been called in to take this unprecedented road trip and retrace British Columbia's historic Gold Rush Trail. And it follows them as they solve mysteries and witness a bunch of hauntings firsthand along the way. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with Corine, Leanne, and Kelly to talk about shooting this unique experience and, well, so very much more. It's a fun ride. And again, it is a 2-part original documentary which starts tonight on the TNE channel at 9 p.m. Eastern. So do check that out. But first, please enjoy our talk with Corine, Leanne, and Kelly as we dive into the Haunted Gold Rush, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one. All right, well, officially, first off, just to kick it off, just congratulations on the show, and thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, and we're excited to chat with you.
Now, I mean, I guess my first question is, I was fascinated by sort of the historical nature of the trip. Like, walk me through sort of what sparked the impetus for not just the show, but I mean, I guess maybe working sort of specifically in a historical milieu.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, we're all from British Columbia.
Okay.
So being BC Canadian girls, this is our own backyard. So it was very exciting when we started to get, you know, people talking about what they've experienced up there, people starting to call us about, hey, you should come up here, you should investigate here. And just with all the history that's been going on in the recent years in the Fraser Canyon, which, you know, Corine can talk about that in the history, it was a natural for us.
Absolutely. And I think too, with like, we've been hearing stories about, you know, the dozens of hauntings and, you know, this intensification of these activities along the whole trail for a while now. And if you think about it, you know, back in the 1800s, the Gold Rush Trail was this wild, booming, often violent place where people, you know, maybe didn't even make it to the gold fields. But recently as well, we've seen, you know, the pandemic, of course, but then fires, floods, the roads have been washed out along this canyon. Like there's been so much destruction. Towns have been burned to the ground along the trail. So it was more like what's being unearthed as well and what's causing this intensification of this activity. So we thought we would attempt to jump at it because we've been having, like Leanne said, so many calls from people saying, can you come up and check it out? So we thought we'd do a road trip and kind of travel the Gold Rush Trail and show the history, but also kind of see who's still there and what kind of untold stories could still be lingering at these spots.
I'll just chime in too about the history. For me, it's, well, for each of us, we commented so many times, and we have commented in the past during our investigations, that it's like you're stepping in, like no matter where you are, you're sort of walking in the past. The past is always sort of surrounding you. So when we were going up the trail, because we also have abilities, it literally felt like we were walking with these spirits and moving up along the trail with them. And also it's like, for other people who haven't necessarily given it this or looked at it from this perspective, it's like tapping into history for them through our eyes and through our experience. And so it's like in the history books, you always hear from a certain narrative, from a certain angle, and there's certain stories that are left out. And so we kind of get to dive into that. And that's why I'm sort of passionate about it, because there's oftentimes people who they didn't get their stories told. And when we go in there, it's like, oh, some people locally might know these stories, but if we can share those stories to a greater audience, it's so powerful and so meaningful to me.
For sure. No, absolutely. Now, I mean, I've got to ask, because I mean, just in watching the first episode, it felt like the three of you were knowingly walking into, like, almost like a firefighter walking into a fire or a soldier walking into a war zone. I mean, how do you sort of rein in the hesitancy? I mean, I can imagine there's a bit of hesitancy as you're coming into this area that is so rich with history. How do you sort of focus on the work and not let your emotions sort of overtake you in the moment?
That's a good question. So with the crew and everybody, we just have to focus. What we do is we narrow in on our why. Why are we here? What is our purpose here? Each person sort of identifies their why. It's essentially a higher purpose. Like, we are here to share what can't be seen. And so each person has their own thing. I know you guys each have your own whys, but as long as we can stay centered in that, in moments of fear, when you're pulled out of that, you have to center yourself back in. And so that's one of the things that we make sure we do before we go in, because when you talk to people ahead of time, like the people who've had these experiences, they're calling us in for good reason. Like, their experiences are real and they're scared and they're unsure, and people have been scratched or hurt physically, assaulted by spirit, and they don't know why. So we get those stories, and also we want to make sure we maintain our like balanced, grounded approach entering, so that we don't let the fear latch onto us, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
And I think too, for myself, it's exactly that. But I think when we get a call, especially when someone says, we're experiencing this, like, is this real? Like, can you tell us what this is? And we go in and we also have that same or similar experience. And then we find other things.
Yeah.
We have to put our, personal feelings sometimes aside to do the job, but also acknowledge our own feelings to work through that and see if we can use our abilities to kind of help figure out that narrative and what are they trying to share. So I think it's tricky. Like, we'll go in and for sure there's anxiety sometimes, and like, what are we walking into? That unknown, for sure. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do, and we are also curious, and that curiosity keeps us going.
And it doesn't mean we don't experience fear,
right?
But when we do, I'm sure you watched the first episode.
Yeah.
There are moments of fear, but it's like Kelly said, just bring yourself back. Like, we always have to just remind ourselves, why are we here? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that fascinates me, because I mean, in that first episode, we see you're coming in, there's a story of a boy in a window, but the further you get into it, it's like, no, this was somebody who was murdered in this house. Like, how often do you get sort of blindsided going into a case like this, or do you have to sort of expect the unexpected?
Yeah. I would say more often than not, things come through that we weren't expecting. Like, so the point is that we just kind of have to go in without expectations. Like, take what people are saying with a grain of salt type of thing. So yes, their experiences are real, but let's also go in sort of like blank slate almost and see what comes to us.
Absolutely. Because
No.
I don't think we've ever gone to a place where it's been like, yep, that's exactly what
Yeah.
we got. Yep, that's it. Yeah. It's like, no, we always get something, and then it's like we have to expect the unexpected. And that unknown that's what's kind of the draw too. Like, we don't know what we're walking into. We know a little bit, but it's like, what else could there be? And that is a big part of this as well.
Yeah.
It's always like, we're going in for this, but then woo, what's that?
Well, and the difference now is you've seen probably some other paranormal shows. We're the first ones going in all female with abilities.
Yeah.
Spirit has presented itself very differently. And we might be seeing a story from a totally different perspective than other people who thought it was something. We're now seeing something else. So, yeah.
And we're not denying anybody else's experience. Everybody gets things differently. Spirit presents different for different people. It's so interesting going into a different location. Like, some spirit might come to us, but that spirit might not, visit someone else. Like, it's just so interesting.
No, I mean, I've got to ask because, I mean, obviously, all three of you are well experienced on sort of keeping everything in check and keeping everything reined in whenever you're on a case and, exploring one of these situations. But how do you keep the crew in line? Because, I mean, I'm sorry, if one of you had sort of been saying, oh, there's a spirit right behind you, it would have been a shot of me with my camera running out the door. So...
Oh my gosh!
Can you talk to
that?
Darcy?
Yeah. So there was a couple experiences when I'm filming this documentary where it just happens, right? So there was this one time where one of our crew, we were traveling. It was a travel day, and by the time we got there, I was like, "There's this man, like, there's these two men, and it's like a grandfather and this uncle, and I'm seeing all these like symbols and." And I'm like, and as soon as I got out of the car, I knew exactly what crew member, and I walked up to him. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt you. I'm like, your grandfather and your uncle, and I think I gave a name or something, I can't remember, but it was like, they say congratulations on finally deciding the ring. And he's like, you can't know my inner thoughts. I just decided like 10 minutes ago driving. And it was all this big engagement thing. And he's like, you can't know that. I'm like, sorry.
Oh, it was wild.
So they come through all the time. And like, there was another experience where we had a crew member and I was feeling something very intense. And like the whole, like this ice cold mass was standing in front of me. And I'm like, I could feel it. And I almost screamed like I was having a moment because all of a sudden I see this other hand come up to feel it. But it was one of the crew. And I'm almost like karate chopped the crew. I was like, oh, it's so funny. There's like all these moments where this happens like all the time. So yeah, it's nothing unusual.
Yeah, and they have experiences too.
Totally.
Well, that was really cool because I know it was really intense for Corine, and she could physically see this figure in front of her. So when she reached out to touch near the figure, by the figure, she felt the cold, so she said it. And so when the hand came through, she said she jumped because it's like seeing something else enter the space startled her. And then after he came out and he was like, oh my gosh, I felt it. And it was like, he was so excited. Yeah.
I can say that the crew, they had some experiences, and by the end of this documentary, they were like, there's something going on here.
But it was a really good team. Yeah. I feel like it was like divinely brought together. Like, everybody's all very respectful. Everybody is there for the right reasons. Yeah. It's just a great experience.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm curious from your perspectives, what is it about being three women with abilities, having these experiences that brings a unique perspective on a show like this? Because, I mean, in watching it, it felt like, I mean, just like you were saying before, you allow yourselves to have that moment, whereas other shows are maybe get a little too analytical or a little too technical with it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first part of that is the dynamic of sisters. So Corine and I are sisters, and Kelly's our best friend. So it's a natural, like, we're feeding off each other all the time because we know each other, like we know what's happening or when someone's going down a path. So that plays out in a unique way, I think, for audiences too, right? Just those idiosyncrasies of it all. But in terms of like being females, I think it's new. Like, a lot of people have already commented, like, we're so excited to see an all-female team, and the fact we're Canadian doing the Gold Rush Trail, like, we're just proud of it too.
And there's always been something said, like, there's strong women's intuition, right? And I think that people are looking for that, like, because the genre doesn't have a lot of female investigators, let alone female leads or anything like that. And I think that people might be looking for something like that because they might have that intuition too and say, hey, I've had experiences. Oh yeah, like, I might have felt something like that too. I wonder if that's part of this. So I think it's just, like Leanne said, it's not your usual girls road trip, that's for sure. But you know, we want to share that this is real and people have these experiences and there is something towards your intuition and we need to listen to that more.
I think it's also like a relatable level, like sister, I don't have a sister, but like hanging out with your sister, or like I feel like a sister, but like hanging out with your sister, this is stuff that you maybe other sisters have been talking about, you know, in their homes, and they see us like best friends.
Yeah.
Like this is stuff that people are doing, maybe not openly. I know I didn't talk about this growing up, so this was like very new to me when I started hanging out with Leanne in high school, and it was like I kind of felt like she's kind of weird because of my conditioning. So it was like opening my mind. So I feel like there's also a lot of folks out there who, when they see this, they can sort of relate to that and maybe open themselves up more and more just by, you know, walking with us.
Well, and I mean, there is an important factor with just the fact that all three of you have moved past that point of skepticism and are embracing your gift. And I mean, it's not leaning on two of you, you know, have experiences, but one of you is a skeptic and then you're on a road trip or that kind of thing. How important is it, do you feel, to push ahead a positive message on the fact that these things do exist?
Yeah.
Well, for myself, and I think for all of us, we've had, and I'm speaking up for myself here, I've had experiences since I was born and I've known nothing else. And so I've mentioned it previously that even in the documentary, that growing up, I learned really quickly to suppress those things based on judgment and what people thought and the looks they gave and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, when you're tested for certain things that as a 9-year-old and told nothing's wrong, you learn to kind of keep things quiet. So for me as an adult, and now that we're all open to this and we understand that it is real, I want to go back and like tell myself as a kid, or tell those kids and people having those experiences that, yeah, it is real. Like you're not, you know, out there, you're like, it is happening to you. Yeah. So I want people and audiences and kids and people to realize that, yeah, I was that scared little kid. I was having experiences and was told to keep quiet, but this is something that's real and it's happening and it's going on. And we can hopefully try to help people accept that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting backstory of all of us, of how we got to this point. And I think that backstory is really important because it kind of hits on everybody's stage in this. Like, you know, from a little kid, like Corine suppressed it. I was younger. I was all in. Like, you know, I've talked about this stuff. I watched all the shows, like all my friends, everybody that knows me, this is not a suppress. But like for Corine, like she's literally just started to tell people in the last little while, which is a huge deal. So
yeah, because Leanne grew up, they shared a room, right? So she was the one who was like, shh, I'm not sharing this with anyone because I'm going to end up getting like brain tests again and all that stuff. Whereas she saw the reality of it and was like, and I see what you're seeing. Like, this is awesome.
Telling all my friends. I'm just like internally like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So then in high school, she tells me all this stuff and I'm just like in one ear out the other for quite a long time. And then it started to sink in, and then it was like this open-mindedness started to happen. So that's kind of like, for me, someone who's watching, like I know that there's going to be people that connect with each of us, because for me, now that I've done this for a while, and actually in the beginning I started to have memories of as a child when I did in fact see spirit, and when I would share it with my parents and they just kind of would like let it pass and not sort of engage in that. So now I hope that people who watch this, maybe they don't need to change their minds. They can believe what they want to believe, but just even watch and just sort of have that little seed planted in there, like as a possibility, you know? Yeah.
Now, I mean, during this road trip, like, is there anything that caught the three of you off guard? Because, I mean, it feels like in order to be open to these experiences, in order to do this job, it's not something that happens inside a rigid box. You have to be learning constantly. You have to be adapting constantly. Is there anything that we're going to see on future episodes that maybe caught the three of you off guard?
Yeah. Yes. Where to begin? So I would say one of the first things that caught me off guard, like I think the big one, I think you probably just hit the 108 barn at the end of episode 1. You know, when you're told stories and you're shown pictures and you're shown things that, you know, this is what you're going in for. And then, you know, you see it.
Yeah.
That was kind of unexpected. I wasn't expecting it to be that clear that quickly and like, bam. And so that like I apologize in advance. I tend to swear a lot when I'm scared. I've learned. So yeah, that was shocking to me, and and just like the reasoning and like kind of the feelings that we got, and and I won't give too much away, but even at Hat Creek, right? Like I was not expecting to find a little boy and or a little girl and a cook. I was expecting to go and trying to find a woman.
Yeah.
So that was like complete 180 to where we were. So yeah, so many things were unexpected. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I can't wait for people to see this. And I mean, Corinne, Leanne Kelly, just thank you so much for the time today. And I mean, congratulations on the show. I think people are gonna get a big kick out of it. And I mean, I think I like how the positivity of the message that it puts out there into the universe. I think that's a good thing too. And just again, congrats on the work, and thank you so much for the time today.
Thank
Awesome.
you, David.
Thank you. It was
Right.
really nice speaking with you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.